Welcome back to another NFL weekly recap of the 2024-2025 season. This week we have week 17, in which we start off the week with Christmas games on Wednesday, December 25th. If you like this type of content, like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out, and I appreciate all the support as we are trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. So without further ado, let's get straight into this one. First of two Wednesday Christmas games were between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Pittsburgh Steelers, in which the Chiefs beat the Steelers 29-10. The Chiefs are now 15-1 and clinched the number 1 seed in the AFC as the Steelers fall to 10-6. Patrick Mahomes went 29 for 38 with 320 yards and 3 touchdowns. Kareem Hunt led the team in rushing with 20 yards and a touchdown. Travis Kelce led the team in receiving with 84 yards and a touchdown. Xavier Worthy and Justin Watson each had a touchdown each. Russell Wilson went 23 for 37 with 205 yards and an interception. Najee Harris led the team in rushing with 74 yards. Russell Wilson had a touchdown on the ground, and Pat Freiermuth led the team in receiving with 60 yards on the day. The scoring opened up with a Kansas City touchdown to open up the game. They took a 13-0 lead over Pittsburgh and headed into halftime with a 13-7 lead. Then the Chiefs followed it up with a field goal and a touchdown on their opening 2 drives. The Steelers answered with a field goal as Kansas City took a 22-10 lead. Kansas City then scored another touchdown to take a 29-10 victory over the Steelers. The second Christmas Day games were between the Baltimore Ravens and the Houston Texans, in which the Ravens beat the Texans 31-2. The Ravens are now 11-5, while the Texans fall to 9-7. Lamar Jackson went 10 out of 15 with 168 yards and a touchdown, and Lamar Jackson also had a touchdown on the ground. Mark Andrews led the team in receiving with 68 yards and a touchdown. Isaiah Likely also had a touchdown as well. CJ Stroud went 17 for 31 with 185 yards and an interception. Joe Mixon led the team in rushing with 26 yards, and Nico Collins led the team in receiving with 59 yards on the day. The opening points were scored with a Ravens touchdown on the opening drive, followed up by a Ravens field goal. The Texans then scored a safety later on in the first half and headed into halftime with the 17-2 lead, and the Texans failed to score any more points as the Ravens pulled up the 31-2 victory. The next game of the week was Thursday Night Football between the Seattle Seahawks and the Chicago Bears, in which the Seahawks beat the Bears 6-3. The Seahawks are 9-7, and the Bears have lost 10 straight as they are now 4-12. Geno Smith went 17 for 23 with 160 yards. Zach Charbonnet led the team in rushing with 57 yards. Noah Fant led the team in receiving with 43 yards on the day. And Caleb Williams went 16 for 28 with 122 yards and an interception. DeAndre Swift led the team in rushing with 53 yards, and DJ Moore led the team in receiving with 54 yards on the play. And the Seahawks opened up the scoring with the field goal on their opening drive, and heading into halftime the score was 6-3, and each team did not score any points after that as Seattle held on to the victory. The next game of the week was on Saturday between the Los Angeles Chargers and the New England Patriots. The Chargers beat the Patriots 40-7. Chargers are now 10-6, locking up a playoff spot, and the Patriots fall to 3-13. Justin Herbert went 26 for 38 with 281 yards and 3 touchdowns. J.K. Dobbins led the team rushing in 76 yards and a touchdown. Ladd McConkey led the team in receiving with 94 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Darius Davis also had a touchdown on the day. Drake May went 12 for 22 with 117 yards and a touchdown. Antonio Gibson led the team in rushing with 63 yards. Demario Douglas led the team in receiving with 46 yards and a touchdown on the day. The first points of the game were scored by a Chargers touchdown, and the Patriots only scored a touchdown towards the end of the first half and didn't score any more points as the Chargers pulled off the 40-7 victory over the Patriots. The next game of the week was between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Denver Broncos, in which the Bengals beat the Broncos 30-24 in overtime. The Bengals are now 8-8, while the Broncos fall to 9-7. Bo Nix went 24 for 31 with 219 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. Jaleel McLaughlin led the team in rushing with 69 yards. Marvin Mims Jr. led the team in receiving with 103 yards and 2 touchdowns. Cortland Sutton also had a touchdown on the day. Joe Burrow went 39 for 49 with 412 yards and 3 touchdowns. Chase Brown led the team in rushing with 67 yards, and Joe Burrow also had a rushing touchdown. T. Higgins led the team in receiving with 131 yards and 3 touchdowns on the day. The opening points were scored by a Denver Broncos field goal, and heading into halftime, Cincinnati led the Broncos 7-3. The Broncos then scored a touchdown and tied it up at 10 heading into the second half, and heading into overtime, it was 24-24 as Bo Nix led a touchdown drive at the end of regulation. It was a punt for the Bengals in overtime, a punt for the Broncos, a missed field goal by the Bengals, and then a punt by the Broncos, followed up by a Bengals touchdown to win the game. The next game of the week was a NFC West divisional matchup between the Los Angeles Rams and the Arizona Cardinals, in which the Rams beat the Cardinals 13-9. The Rams are now 10-6, while the Cardinals are 7-9. Kyler Murray went 33 for 48 with 321 yards, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions. Michael Carter led the team in rushing with 70 yards. Trey McBride led the team in receiving with 123 yards and a touchdown, while Matthew Stafford went 17 for 32 with 189 yards. Kyron Williams led the team in rushing with 56 yards and a touchdown. Puka Nacua led the team in receiving with 129 yards. The points were first scored by a Rams with a touchdown in the second quarter, as well as a field goal to end the half. They took a 10-0 lead over the Cardinals, and the Cardinals could not eclipse what the Rams scored in the first half and lost 13-9. The next game of the week was a AFC East matchup between the Buffalo Bills and the New York Jets, in which the Bills beat the Jets 40-14. The Jets fall to 4-12, while the Bills are 13-3. Aaron Rodgers went 12 for 18 with 112 yards and 2 picks. Tyrod Taylor went 11 for 14 with 83 yards and 2 touchdowns. Breece Hall led the team in rushing with 45 yards. Garrett Wilson led the team in receiving with 66 yards and a touchdown. Tyler Conklin also had a touchdown on the day. Josh Allen went 16 for 27 with 182 yards and 2 touchdowns. Mitch Trubisky went 1 for 1 with 69 yards and a touchdown. James Cook led the team in rushing with 53 yards and a touchdown. Josh Allen also had a touchdown on the ground. Tyrell Shavers led the team in receiving with 69 yards and a touchdown. Amari Cooper and Keon Coleman each had a touchdown on the day. The first points of the game were scored with a Bills touchdown, and heading into halftime, the Bills had a 12-0 lead over the Jets, and the Jets could only score 14 points at the very end in garbage time, as the Bills had already amassed 40 points for the victory. The next game of the week was between the Las Vegas Raiders and the New Orleans Saints, in which the Raiders beat the Saints 25-10. The Raiders are now 4-12, while the Saints fall to 5-11. Aiden O'Connell went 20 for 35 with 242 yards and 2 touchdowns. Amir Abdullah led the team in rushing with 115 yards. Brock Bowers led the team in receiving with 77 yards. Both Jacoby Myers and Trey Tucker each had a touchdown. Spencer Rattler went 20 for 36 with 218 yards, a touchdown, and 2 picks. Spencer Rattler also led the team in rushing with 46 yards. Jawan Johnson led the team in receiving with 66 yards, and Foster Moreau had a touchdown on the day. The first points were scored with a Raiders field goal, and then a couple drives later, the Saints scored a touchdown, and heading into halftime, the Raiders had a 13-10 lead over the Saints. They then scored a field goal to make it 16-10. The Saints failed to score any more points thereafter as the Raiders pulled off the victory. The next game of the week was between the Indianapolis Colts and the New York Giants, in which the Giants beat the Colts 45-33. The Giants are now 3-13, while the Colts fall to 7-9. Joe Flacco went 26 for 38 with 330 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 picks. Jonathan Taylor led the team in rushing with 125 yards and 2 touchdowns. Alec Pierce led the team in receiving with 122 yards and a touchdown. Michael Pittman also had a touchdown on the day. Drew Lock went 17 for 23 with 309 yards and 4 touchdowns. Tyrone Tracy led the team in rushing with 59 yards, and Drew Lock had a touchdown on the ground. Malik Neighbors led the team in receiving with 171 yards and 2 touchdowns. Wandale Robinson and Darius Slayton each had a touchdown on the day. The first points of the day were scored by a Colts field goal, and heading into halftime, the Giants held a 21-13 lead, and then it was a shootout in the second half as the Giants pulled away with the 45-33 victory. The next game of the week was a NFC East divisional matchup between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys, in which the Eagles beat the Cowboys 41-7. The Eagles are now 13-3. The Cowboys are now 7-9. Cooper Rush went 15 for 28 with 147 yards, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions. Rico Dowdle led the team in rushing with 104 yards. Brandon Cooks led the team in receiving with 52 yards, and Jalen Tolbert had a touchdown on the day. Kenny Pickett went 10 for 15 with 143 yards and a touchdown. Tanner McKee then went 3 for 4 with 54 yards and 2 touchdowns. Saquon Barkley had 167 yards, and Kenny Pickett had a touchdown on the ground. This game was the game that Saquon Barkley eclipsed 2,000 rushing yards on the year. Devontae Smith led the team in receiving with 120 yards and 2 touchdowns, while A.J. Brown also had a touchdown as well. The first points of the game were scored on the opening drive with a Philadelphia pick six. Heading into halftime, the Eagles led 24-7. The Cowboys failed to score any more points as the Eagles pulled home the victory. The next game of the week was a divisional matchup in the NFC South between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Carolina Panthers. The Buccaneers won 48-14 as they are 9-7. Panthers are now 4-12. Bryce Young went 15 for 28 with 203 yards and 2 touchdowns. Raheem Blackshear led the team in rushing with 20 yards. Adam Thielen led the team in receiving with 110 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Baker Mayfield went 27 for 32 with 359 yards and 5 touchdowns. Bucky Irving led the team in rushing with 113 yards, and Mike Evans led the team in receiving with 97 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jalen McMillan had 2 touchdowns, and Payne Durham also had a touchdown on the day. The opening points were scored by a Buccaneers touchdown, followed up by a Panthers touchdown, and heading into halftime, the Buccaneers led 27-14. With Carolina failing to score any more points in the second half, the Buccaneers pulled away with a victory. The next game of the week was a AFC South matchup between the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Titans, in which the Jaguars beat the Titans 20-13. The Titans fall to 3-13, while the Jaguars are 4-12. Mason Rudolph went 19 for 31 with 193 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Tyjae Spears led the team in rushing with 95 yards. Calvin Ridley led the team in receiving with 84 yards as Nick Vannett had a touchdown as well. Mac Jones went 15 for 22 with 174 yards and 2 touchdowns. Travis Etienne led the team in rushing with 49 yards on the day. Brian Thomas led the team in receiving with 91 yards and a touchdown. Parker Washington also had a touchdown on the day. The opening points were scored on the opening drive with a Jacksonville field goal. Heading into halftime, Jacksonville led 13-3 over Tennessee. Tennessee then scored a touchdown to open up the second half. The Jacksonville Jaguars capped it off with a touchdown to make it 20-10, followed up by a Titans field goal, but they could not score as the Jacksonville Jaguars held on to the victory. The next game of the week was between the Miami Dolphins and the Cleveland Browns, in which the Dolphins beat the Browns 20-3. The Dolphins are now 8-8, while the Browns fall to 3-13. Tyler Huntley went 22 for 26 with 225 yards and a touchdown. He also led the team in rushing with 52 yards and a touchdown. Tyreek Hill led the team in receiving with 105 yards. Jonnu Smith had a touchdown on the day. Dorian Thompson-Robinson went 24 for 47 with 170 yards and an interception. Deontay Foreman led the team in rushing with 49 yards, and Jerry Jeudy led the team in receiving with 94 yards on the day. The opening points of the game were scored by a Dolphins field goal, followed up by a Browns field goal, and heading into halftime, Miami led 6-3. The Browns failed to score any points as the Dolphins pulled away with a victory. Next game of the week was a NFC North matchup between the Minnesota Vikings and the Green Bay Packers, in which the Vikings beat the Packers 27-25. The Vikings are now 14-2. The Packers are now 11-5. Jordan Love went 19 for 30 with 185 yards and a touchdown. Josh Jacobs led the team in rushing with 69 yards and a touchdown. Emmanuel Wilson also had a rushing touchdown. Romeo Doubs led the team in receiving with 58 yards on the day, and Malik Heath had a touchdown as well. Sam Darnold went 33 for 43 with 377 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. Aaron Jones led the team in rushing with 47 yards. Justin Jefferson led the team in receiving with 92 yards. Jalen Naylor and Jordan Addison and Cam Akers each had a touchdown on the day. The opening points of the game were scored by a Packers field goal, and heading into halftime, Minnesota had a 13-3 lead over the Packers. They then got the ball and scored a touchdown to make it 20-3. Packers then answered with a touchdown, followed up by a Vikings touchdown to make it 27-10. The Vikings didn't score any more points, but the Vikings and Packers made it interesting as the Packers scored a touchdown and gave us the final score of 27-25. Sunday Night Football became the battle between the rookie quarterbacks Michael Penix and Jaden Daniels. The Washington Commanders beat the Atlanta Falcons 30-24 in overtime as the Falcons fall to 8-8 and the Commanders are now 11-5. Michael Penix Jr. went 19 for 35 with 223 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Bijan Robinson led the team in rushing with 90 yards and 2 touchdowns. Drake London led the team in receiving with 106 yards. Kyle Pitts had a touchdown on the day as well. Jaden Daniels went 24 for 36 with 227 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. He also led the team in rushing with 127 yards, and Chris Rodriguez Jr. had a touchdown on the ground. Olamide Zaccheaus led the team in receiving with 85 yards and a touchdown. Zach Ertz also had 72 yards and 2 touchdowns on the day. The first points of the game were scored on the opening drive for the Commanders with a touchdown, followed up by a Falcons touchdown. Heading into halftime, Atlanta had a 17-7 lead over the Commanders. The Commanders then scored 2 consecutive touchdowns on their opening 2 drives as they took the lead 21-17, then scored a field goal to take a 24-17 lead over the Falcons. The Falcons then scored a touchdown to tie it up at 24 and missed a final second field goal, taking it into overtime. The Commanders got the ball to start off overtime and took it down the field for a touchdown and victory. The final game of the week was Monday Night Football between the Detroit Lions and the San Francisco 49ers, a repeat of the NFC Conference Championship last year. The Lions beat the Niners 40-34 as they are now 14-2 and the Niners fall to 6-10. Jared Goff went 26 for 34 with 303 yards and 3 touchdowns. Jahmyr Gibbs led the team in rushing with 117 yards and a touchdown. Jameson Williams also had a touchdown on the ground. Jameson Williams led the team in receiving with 77 yards and a receiving touchdown. Sam Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown each had a touchdown as well. Brock Purdy went 27 for 35 for 377 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 picks. Isaac Guerrero led the team in rushing with 34 yards. Brock Purdy and Josh Dobbs each had a rushing touchdown. Ricky Pearsall led the team in receiving with 141 yards and a touchdown. Kyle Juszczyk and Deebo Samuel each had a touchdown as well. The opening points were scored by a touchdown by the 49ers, and we had a shootout in the first half as the score heading into halftime was 21-13 with the Niners in the lead. The Lions then scored a touchdown on their opening drive to tie it up at 21, followed up by a Niners touchdown to make it 28-21. The Lions then scored a field goal and then a touchdown and then a field goal to take a 34-28 lead over the Niners. They then scored another touchdown to make it 40-28. The Niners then scored a final touchdown to give us the final score of 40-34. And that recaps all 16 games for Week 17 in the 2024-2025 NFL season. Were there any score lines that surprised you? And who do you guys think will get the final spots in the playoffs in the NFC and AFC? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this type of content, like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out, and I appreciate all the support as we are trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. If you're a fan of the NFL and college football, stay tuned as we'll be covering both all season long. Appreciate all the support, and we'll catch you in the next one. Take care.